Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. Did you fail to dress up for tonight's show? No tie, an old shirt and slacks, a house dress? Well, don't give it a thought. We're glad you came as you are. We just want you to enjoy yourselves. Don't forget to visit our refreshment center during the intermission or any time. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. So will the youngsters. Everything is quality and so good. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family. Bring your friends. There are always wonderful new pictures to see, delightful snacks to nibble, a gay, pleasant evening for all. Oh, a word of caution. Don't drive over 10 miles an hour in the theater area for your safety's sake. And Mom or Pop, go with the kids when they leave the car. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon. Wouldn't some hot buttered popcorn hit the spot right now? Extra fluffy, extra big kernels of it pop to perfection. Then drenched with the golden goodness of pure sweet creamery butter. Can't you just taste it? We heat the container extra high, but you better buy 2 more for the rest of the family. Piping hot, golden buttered popcorn at the refreshment center right now.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. Rats. Thousands. Millions of them.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
Dracula? Oh, what's he done to you, dearie? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened his vein in his arm, and he made me drink.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Don't touch that!
Hey, kids, how would you like to hear this on the screen instead of the great show you came to see? That's what you sound like. Honest. Please cooperate and do your part in keeping this theater quiet so everyone, including you, can enjoy it. Now remember, lots of adults and kids, too, paid admission to enjoy the show. We must insist on absolute quiet. Otherwise, we will be forced to evict all disturbance makers from the theater. Those asked to leave today will be refused admission to this theater in the future. Thank you.
Hey now! Hey everybody! Oh, I just stole that from from Adam and Sitch. Hi everybody! How's it going? Welcome to the November live stream where we're talking about, this is the big one, we're talking about Universal Monsters, the classic, the big names, the big monsters, the classic monsters. And I'm glad to see that the regulars are here, chatting away in the room there. Yeah, amazing casts in those early movies. Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Edward Van Sloan, Dwight Fry. Come on. Can't even. Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, all the lab equipment was genuine relics. Yeah, the original Strickfaden machines. You bet. By Carl Strickfaden? Carl? I think that was his first name. Kevin? Something like that. But yes, Strickfaden's machines there were in that. Alright, so I actually have a plan this time. It's not just shooting the breeze, but we're going to actually have things a bit structured this time around. Kaiser says, I hope you enjoyed Thanksgiving. Well, I mean, my Thanksgiving was a month ago. I'm Canadian. So, but American Thanksgiving was this past week, I guess. So hopefully our American viewers, you enjoyed your Thanksgiving and watched King Kong as you're supposed to and all that sort of stuff. What we're going to do here tonight, I got it a bit structured. We're going to talk about Universal Monsters by era. So we're going to be going era by era through the monsters and just seeing where the conversation goes in that framework. Right, going era by era, from the silent era through to the atomic age. So what do I mean? Well, if you've watched my videos on Universal Monsters, you know what I'm talking about. But to start out with, of course, the silent era. So that would be the era 1923 to 1929. The earliest, Thanksgiving twice, okay, the earliest period of Universal Monsters before there was even really a Universal Monsters franchise to speak of. Sort of this assortment of historical epics and sort of old dark house mysteries, screwball mysteries, and one that could probably be considered a genuine horror film. But these have all sort of been retconned back into the Universal Monsters franchise. So we're talking Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney, Phantom of the Opera, The Cat and the Canary, The Man Who Laughs with Conrad Veidt, The Last Warning, and The Last Performance. So, silent era Universal Monsters. So, what do you think? What do you think? What's your favorite of the silent era Universal Monster movies? Lon Chaney Sr. was Universal's first horror star? Yep, definitely. And more than that, thrillers and, I mean, anything where his unique talents as a makeup magician came into use. And Chaney actually was the first pick to play Dracula as well in 1931. But unfortunately, he passed away, and as a consequence, Bela Lugosi was picked instead. Chaney's Phantom of the Opera has never surpassed. No, it has not ever been surpassed. Every subsequent version is eh. I mean, the Andrew Lloyd Webber one there, I mean, it's based off the Webber musical, right? So it's got something a little bit different going on. And it has Emmy Rossum in it, so there's that going for it. Although the girl I was dating at the time it came out, for her it was Gerard Butler, right? So very good, very attractive leads in that one. One thing that I would love to see sometime is for some enterprising person to take the silent Phantom of the Opera, Lon Chaney, and actually add the score from Andrew Lloyd Webber into it. So you get the music of the night and the Phantom of the Opera song and everything, in the right spots in the Chaney version. I think would be very interesting, sort of cinematic exercise to see how that works out. In fact, I have kind of done that. We actually did play, we being my wife and I, we actually played that segment where Christine Dyke, she goes into the mirror and then gets taken down to the Phantom's lair. We actually did play that against the Lloyd Webber music, and it does work, actually, surprisingly well. Even the pacing actually worked really well. So it is doable for someone who maybe has more interest in that than I do. But that'll be an interesting experiment to see the Chaney Phantom silent movie with the Lloyd Webber music. And now we're talking Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah, which is better, right? The 1923 Lon Chaney version or the 1939 Charles Laughton version. And they both have amazing things going for them. I mean, Charles Laughton was born to play that role. Like, that was brilliant. But for scope and scale, I mean, the silent film version, I think, is better. It's really hard to say. And especially for me, because Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of my favorite books. Like, if you've never actually read the novel, read the novel. It is amazing. Claude Frollo is actually one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. He's much more complex than just the creepy repressed religious guy. I mean, the book is a paean to the Middle Ages and the French Middle Ages specifically, and Notre Dame Cathedral itself. And the cathedral itself is actually one of my favorite places on earth. I've been to France twice, and Notre Dame, of course, was on the list both times. And where my then girlfriend became a fiance on that trip and is now my wife, where we stayed on our last trip there to France, we actually ended up walking by Notre Dame like almost every day, and like virtually every day would stop in to pray or to do a bit more sightseeing or whatever. Notre Dame de Paris is like my spiritual home away from home. Like, there's my church here where I live, and then there's Notre Dame de Paris, which was, of course, heartbreaking when the fire happened. And I say I didn't, but I almost. My wife insists that I did cry when I found out that the rose windows didn't get destroyed in the fire. Once they've the multi-year project of restoring Notre Dame. I mean, it took a couple hundred years to build it to begin with, so it's a couple decades to repair it, right? But hopefully I'll get to see her again before I die. But yeah, I mean, either version. The Disney version you guys are talking about, I absolutely despise it. I do not like the Disney version. Good art. Like, the character designs, the art in it is fantastic. That stuff's good. But the story, what they did to the characters, just no, I cannot do it. They tried to turn Hunchback of Notre Dame into like a Les Mis style musical by way of Disney, and that is just not a combination that is going to work. So yeah, and I mean, no version that I have seen has the courage to end the way the book does. The book's ending is pretty Victor Hugo. It's a French novel by Victor Hugo. So no film version that I've seen has had the courage to actually do the book's ending. But there was just something particularly insidious and odious about how Disney did it that I didn't care for. And I mean, I'm pretty forgiving for a lot of Disney stuff, except lately, right? Because nobody is. Have you seen the returns on Wish? Oh my god. Yeah, it just I cannot do the Disney Hunchback. I've even watched it in French, hoping that it would be better, and no such luck. But yeah, great character designs. I mean, I love the design of Frollo in it, but just No, it's can't do it. Can't do it. There was a Hunchback in Mad Monster Party. Yeah, Mad Monster Party had everybody in it. had all the monsters represented in one way or another, except the Fly, I guess. Yeah, there's all the Universal guys and Kong. No Fly though, but that's all right. Probably too on the nose there. That was still under copyright. Yeah, I guess it would be, wouldn't it? You wouldn't be able to do in the late 1960s. You would not have been able to do The Fly and have anybody think it was anything other than a copyright infringing take on the movie. So yeah, whereas like you say, oh no, this is just the Dracula from the book, right? Going back here, Doug says he's never seen The Man Who Laughs. It's a decade since Phantom and Hunchback. See them. Kino has absolutely beautiful Blu-rays for Phantom and Hunchback. Like those are must-buy discs. Like, get those Blu-rays. Man Who Laughs is it's a Blu-ray from Flickr Alley. Has that one, but you can find it online as well. And it is also a brilliant movie. I mean, it is a Victor Hugo historical drama. So, of course, the real monster is society, right? Like, in Hunchback, the real monster is society. In The Man Who Laughs, the real monster is society. But, I mean, Conrad Veidt is so good in The Man Who Laughs. And the scene where he sort of claims his dignity despite his the disability that's been forced on him is just yes. Like, yes, man. All right. Yeah, Man Who Laughs is great. And if you're into Victor Hugo historical epics, then there you go. Again, not really a horror movie. Like, Hunchback isn't a horror movie either, right? It's just these characters get grandfathered into the Universal Monsters, pad out the franchise a bit, which is fine by me. I mean, I would love for NECA to not just stop after doing the creature, but to actually keep going and make figures of like Lon Chaney, Quasimodo, and The Man Who Laughs, Gwynplaine. I would love to get those as action figures to go with the other NECA figures, but we'll see. I think they're going to stop after now that Creature is done. They've got the Magnificent Seven plus Phantom, so I think they're going to call that quits after that. Unfortunately, Hunchback needs another remake. Probably turn into a comedy. I would trust Hollywood to make a good Hunchback of Notre Dame even less now than when Disney did it. God, could you imagine the kind of social messaging in a modern Hunchback of Notre Dame that, like, it's Victor Hugo, so it already has social messaging in it, and that's not the problem. It was like, oh, movies have always been whatever, have always had social message, always had politics in them. Yeah, they always have. It's just that today the politics in them is terrible. That's what I have a problem with. It's not that they have politics, it's that they have modern politics in it. Have Hugo's novel, read so many years ago, the final pages still haunt me, no spoilers, yeah. The novel is incredible. The novel Hunchback of Notre Dame. Notre Dame de Paris, in fact. It's not actually called Hunchback of Notre Dame, because the main character of the novel is the cathedral. Yeah, it's an amazing book. It's an absolutely amazing book. My bookmark is stuck somewhere in the middle of it right now. I just progressively read through it every now and then for as much as I do read. Not because I can't, just because I'm more visual spatial. Always fall asleep when I start reading. Love Mad Monster Party. Disney kneecapped it. It's a Clawfoot's villain song. Heavens and Hellfire is the best ever. I don't get the appeal of the Hellfire song. I don't orally. It just sounds bad to me. So I think everyone just gets all goo-goo eyes about it because it's like, ooh, it's really this really dark song in a Disney movie. It's like, eh. But Bob Keane's inspired by the character. Yeah. Gwynplaine was the inspiration for the Joker. Yeah. Yeah. Would a modern Hunchback of Notre Dame be anti-religion? The original novel was anti-religion. No, I wouldn't say that the novel was anti-religion. I think it's more complex than that. It definitely had commentary on the abuses of religious authority. Like that's a lot of Claude Frollo's character. But it actually has some really insightful things to say. There's a whole chapter where Frollo is giving this monologue about how the printing press is replacing the church. Because sort of like, before the printing press, right, literacy was lower. And people's experience of things was mediated more by architecture. That's what he's talking about in it. Is that you go to the church, you experience the architecture, you see the frescoes, you see the statues, you see the stained glass, and that has an effect on you and your psyche, which you experience if you go to a cathedral, like go to Notre Dame once it's reopened, and you'll sense that it's palpable. And that talks about, and it gets replaced by the printing press, where it's just the abstract ideas written on the page, and how that changes your psyche, and how that changes how you see the world, right? From experiencing something to processing information. And of course, Hugo is expressing all this, which is like decades before Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian media philosopher who coined the term "the medium is the message," right? The whole idea that it's not just the content of a medium that changes your perception, it's the medium itself, right? Like how you process television is different from how you process the printed word, which is different from how you process architecture. All these how the medium has its own parameters that change how you think and how you process it and how you experience it. And Victor Hugo's talking about all that in the context of the church. And so it's not clear in the novel that Hugo is anti-religion as such. I think he would be more intelligent and nuanced than that. And I mean, I didn't get the impression from the multiple times I've read the book that it was anti-religion as such. Although I can see how maybe if you're not as experienced with the church, that you might see Frollo as just being sort of a stereotypical corrupt priest, but it's not that. It's much more nuanced than that. Would a modern Hunchback of Notre Dame be anti-religion, though? Yeah. A modern one? Yeah, you take anything that's nuanced and you flatten it out and then you make it say the modern thing, right? I mean, hell, even in the original movies, both the Lawton and the Chaney versions, heck, even the Disney version, actually, they didn't do Frollo as a religious person. He wasn't a priest in those movies. He was like a justice or something like that, right? They didn't. None of them had the courage to actually make him a priest because of the way that could have been interpreted. I mean, today it would be a given that they would make him the stereotypical corrupt Catholic priest, whatever, right? Hi, Martin. Glad you made it. Catholic Church didn't come across very well in Hunchback of Notre Dame. I don't know. Like I said, it's more complex, I think, in the original novel than just saying it's pro or anti-religion. Esmeralda was a very sympathetic heroine. Is it okay to call her a Roma today? Yeah, I mean, that would be the appropriate ethnic term, right? Roma. Yeah, I mean, this is a Victor Hugo novel, so Esmeralda is sympathetic to a degree, but she isn't a very intelligent person. Right? Like, nobody in a Victor Hugo novel is like a good person, right? Like, everyone has flaws. And Esmeralda's flaws. She's very naive. She's very dreamy, which is a bad thing in the context of a Victor Hugo novel. she has a certain amount of sympathy in that she is, sort of the victim of Claude Frollo. But, I mean, she's also pining away after Phoebus, who is an a-hole, like an irredeemable a-hole. And so it's kind of like pathetic in how she's mooning after Phoebus, even though Phoebus is like, couldn't care less about her. So she's sympathetic, but in a lot of ways she's also like pathetic as well. So it's, again, Victor Hugo novels, right? So was a Quasimodo played by Anthony Quinn? I have not seen that one in forever, so. Israel probably never had a formal education. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the Middle Ages, right? There was formal education, but it was offered by the church primarily. So, as a wandering Roma, no fixed address, probably not taking a lot of advantage of church schools and universities, right? A very bad thing to be naive in a French novel, yes. The French are not kind to the naive. Some of his characters were of their time. Yeah, definitely. All right. So, good. Yeah, I love Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's like, again, one of my favorite books because it is so nuanced and complex and covers so many interesting subjects and is steeped in, well, see, it's not medieval romanticism. Like, it's quasi-romantic because it is, it is this look back on the Middle Ages. And remember, Victor Hugo is intentionally writing this book to save Notre Dame, like to save it from the wrecking ball, save it from being destroyed. He writes this novel to try and reinvigorate people's love of this cathedral. So that's why I say it's not fully anti-religion, right? Because if it was fully anti-religion, anti-Catholic Church, then it would be like, yeah, no, tear the cathedral down then, right? Because it's so bad and so corrupt. It's not that simple. Because it is so complicated. That's one of the reasons I love it. The church did take in Quasimodo, though, yeah. Yeah, and it's like the relationship between Frollo and Quasimodo in the book is complicated because Frollo's complicated. It's not as simple as, oh, he's just abusing Quasimodo. He was the one to take in Quasimodo and take care of him. He did understand how he could exploit Quasimodo. And he didn't take him in so much out of love. That's the thing that, like, Frollo was not motivated by love. He's a very intellectual person, right? He's a scholar. And he's very much by the book, like literally, like he's reading, he's studying, he's philosophizing. He's a very intellectual person. But a rational person as well. And that all gets thrown out of whack when he comes across Esmeralda. So it's not just that, oh, he's a repressed religious priest. He's a repressed Catholic priest. And isn't the church so hypocritical? It's not that simple. There's a lot more in the fact that Frollo is an intellectual, a rationalist, who then gets swept up in his emotions because of his contact with Esmeralda. And that's when his relationships with, like, Quasimodo become more abusive and exploitative. Again, not that he loved Quasimodo before, but he certainly starts to use Quasimodo more as a tool to the end of getting Esmeralda, which is his own sort of irrational libidinous impulses coming out that he had suppressed so long. Again, not so much because he was religious, but because he was intellectual. Yeah. Martin says, it's strange that we're talking about Universal Monsters way after October and right after Thanksgiving in December. Christmas time just around the corner. I'm always putting up decorations. Well, historically, Christmas was a time for ghost stories, especially the 12 days of Christmas, so the period between Christmas and Epiphany. So Epiphany is January 5th. So that December 25th, January 5th, those 12 days in there, that is the 12 days of Christmas. And over that, traditionally, has been a time of ghost stories and horror stories and things. So you think of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, right? These visitations by ghosts are always taking place, over Christmas. There's a Canadian folk story, the Chasse Galerie, about these voyageurs, these French-Canadian fur traders and stuff, being out far in the backwoods who want to get back to Montreal for New Year's. And so they end up making a deal with the devil to get his flying canoe and fly that back to Montreal, on the condition that they do not touch a church spire and they do not use the Lord's name in vain. Now that is a challenge because Quebec has a lot of churches, and like every French swear, Quebecois French swear, is something blasphemous. So it's just like, well, this is doomed to failure. But then that's on New Year's, right? So that actually around Christmas has historically been a time of ghost stories and spooky goings on and things like that. Just that in our society now we've shifted that over to Halloween, which at the time a lot of these stories had been written, Halloween didn't really exist, at least not the way that we know it today. Halloween, as we practice it, was invented in like the late 19th, early 20th century. Like trick-or-treating didn't exist prior to like 1927. So Halloween or Christmas was the time for ghost stories, right? The dead of winter, the winter solstice, right? The darkest night of the year, all that sort of stuff. So it's not totally inappropriate, Martin. Thanksgiving horror movie? Yeah, I didn't see it. Back in the day, I had the first provincial French language arts exam in grade 12. They asked for an example of a character you read in the last 3 years who overcame obstacles. I almost failed. Yeah, in French novels, you're going to find a character who overcomes obstacles. Sure. Guys, really, really against a Walmart knockoff coming to town, mayhem ensues. I have not seen The Man of a Thousand Faces with James Cagney. I should at some point. That would be not a bad idea. All right. Well, I think we've talked a fair bit about that. And we still have a few more eras to go through, don't we? So, next up here is, of course, the classical era. So this is the golden age of Hollywood here. Classic era 1931 to 1936. Of course, ending with the bankruptcy of Universal Studios itself, thanks to Showboat. But we're talking, these are the classic movies, of course. Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Murders in the Rue Morgue, The Old Dark House, The Invisible Man, Secret of the Blue Room, The Black Cat, The Raven, Werewolf of London, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Invisible Ray, and Dracula's Daughter. So, thoughts on the classical era of the Universal monsters? But you've probably seen Nosferatu. I have seen Nosferatu, going back to Silent Era for a moment. Yes, I have seen Nosferatu. I have a copy of it. I even had an early website about Nosferatu way back in the 80s. Or not 80s, sorry, late 90s. 98-ish is when I actually had like the only Nosferatu website around. Actually, like Nosferatu more than Dracula. Yeah, well, I mean, they have different things going on, right? What makes the Universal Dracula is the cast. I mean, it's got the quintessential spooky stuff, right? But Todd Browning's direction is a little bit meh. Definitely not a very dynamic director in that movie, at least. So what really pulls together the Universal Dracula is the cast. You have Bela Lugosi, you have Edward Van Sloan, you have Dwight Fry. Like, come on. Like, that's amazing. The Spanish version has way better cinematography, way better direction, but it doesn't have doesn't have the cast, doesn't have the actors, and that is to its detriment. Um, and Nosferatu is a different experience altogether, right? That connection between sort of vampirism and Dracula and the plague and stuff like that. You have that more Germanic aspect in Nosferatu. They're both good, right? Like, they're all classic. Ain't that enough? Yeah, I mean, they're different. It's the more similar they are, the more you can compare them, right? Like, what's your favorite version of Dracula? What's your favorite version of Nosferatu? Because there's already two and a third one coming out now, apparently. But I mean, why choose between Nosferatu and Dracula? Lugosi's Dracula is very stage bound, especially the second half. Yeah, well, it is. It's an adaptation of the stage play. That's where a lot of people misinterpret it. Is that they think it's an adaptation of the novel. It's actually not an adaptation of the novel. It's an adaptation of the stage play that was going around. And in fact, Bela Lugosi and Edward Van Sloan played those same roles on Broadway for the stage version of Dracula. So it's really what we're looking at in Universal's Dracula is a filmed version of the stage play, essentially. The Spanish version, Carlos Vieras, played Dracula in the Spanish version, which it has the same script, exact same sets, but the story goes that they watched the daily. They would film at night while the English-speaking cast was filming during the day, and they would watch the dailies of the English, what the English cast came up with, and we're like, we can do better than this. And so they deliberately went to outshine it. And I mean, the cinematography is better. The knockout scene in the Spanish version is the boat ride. When they're on the... do they actually name it in the movie? I can't remember. But on the Demeter, as they're going to London. In the Spanish version, that scene is incredible. It's not... it's nothing to write home about in the English version. But the Spanish version, just unbelievable. It's one of the most scary scenes in all of Universal's monsters. If I'm gonna do a top 10 list of scariest scenes of Universal monsters, which I guess is an idea for a video down the road, the boat scene in the Spanish Dracula would definitely be up there. The women in the Spanish Dracula are more sensual. Well, of course. It's the Spanish version. Martin says, what are your thoughts on the Nosferatu remake? Well, it's Werner Herzog, isn't it? It's very long. It's very slow. Artistic, certainly. But it's Werner Herzog. I don't watch it with any regularity. I've actually seen it in theater, even. They showed it for a Halloween once. So we used to have this amazing movie theater in my city. It was a 1950s Art Deco theater. And they would have a Halloween party, which was amazing, and where they would usually show like some silent movie. So like Count of Dr. Caligari was one year, Nosferatu was another year. But then they would also have this sort of like, around Halloween is when they would bring in like the art house horror movies and stuff. And so that's where actually I first saw the remake of Nosferatu, was at the Uptown Screen, is what the name of it was. And nearly empty theater. This beautiful, gorgeous 50s Art Deco theater. And this very long movie was very slow and very quiet. It was interesting. But I do prefer the silent version of Nosferatu, certainly. Dwight Frye almost stole the whole film as Renfield. Yeah. Dwight Frye is amazing. Dwight Frye was one of those actors that just their presence just radiated off the screen. Like just the charisma, the screen presence that he had was amazing. It's sad that he got typecast into roles as sort of the crazy henchman or whatever. Um, and then, a few just cameos, which is just mind-boggling to me that you'd have Dwight Fry, and the only role you can get for him in a movie is like random reporter in one scene. Like, what on earth? Why would you do that with Dwight Fry? And then, of course, he was taken before his time. Spanish version explains what happened to Lucy. Yes, she just like poof, she's just gone. They talk about her. Oh, there's like some woman in white. I guess it's Lucy, and they just never talk about it again. It's just like, what? What happened? Klaus Kinski was impressive as Nosferatu, yeah. Oh yeah, you noticed my cup. I'm drinking eggnog out of. Yes, that is my old Night Before Christmas mug from the Disney store from a million years ago. I do like Nightmare Before Christmas. Used to be a big Tim Burton fan, in fact, but then Tim Burton eventually got less and less Tim Burton-y and more bad. So nowadays, it's pretty much just his early stuff that I still like. So Edward Scissorhands, Night Before Christmas, of course. Beetlejuice is fun. Ed Wood, of course, is his best like movie, right? His best cinematic movie. Big Fish was actually good. It would have been interesting to see Tim Burton go more in that direction, but he went more in the direction of just like, oh, Disney's paying me to do a remake of this story. Okay, sure. But yeah, Night Before Christmas is good. Makeup was on point. Dwight Fry was a good character actor. Yep, definitely. James Whale liked working with Dwight Fry. He even got him a role in The Invisible Man. Yes, James Whale, visionary director who unfortunately was too far ahead of his time, really. There's so much more he could have done if the studio had more faith in him. But I mean, after Showboat, in a way, I don't blame them either, though. Like that said, because he did essentially like nearly bankrupt the company, and he caused the Lemleys to lose the company because of his meticulous work on Showboat that ended up with Showboat going so far over budget that there's like almost no way it could have turned a profit. It did, but not before Universal had to go into receivership and get bought out, right? So that's too bad. And then he kind of left shortly thereafter because everyone kept such a tight rein on James Whale after that. He couldn't do what he wanted to do. Or I think The Old Dark House. I think The Old Dark House is great. I think Old Dark House is actually one of my favorite non-monster Universal monster movies. Right, so you have the ones with the monsters, right? Of course, Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, yada 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 yada. But then during this classical era, you have these movies that. Let me bring up the posters again. So, Old Dark House, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Secret of the Blue Room, Black Cat, Raven, arguably The Invisible Ray. They aren't monster movies, right? They're horror movies, they're thrillers. The people in them do monstrous things, but they're not like monster movies, right? So, in my opinion, The Old Dark House and The Black Cat are the two best non-monster Universal monster movies. Old Dark House is just this great, very James Whale, sort of dark screwball comedy. Charles Laughton's in it. Boris Karloff's in it. Raymond Massey's in it. Gloria Swanson. Ernest Theisker. Like, the cast is amazing in The Old Dark House. And, I mean, it's very funny. It's very wry. It's very dark. It's one of the few... Actually, interesting. Yeah, Old Dark House and The Black Cat are both the movies that deal most directly with the aftermath of World War I as well. And sort of the lost generation is a major theme of The Old Dark House. Right? These people who've been traumatized by the war. and what the war has done, and finding something to actually live for and die for after the traumas and the disillusionment of the First World War is a major theme in the Old Dark House. And it's just funny and weird and just a great movie. The Old Dark House the Black Cat is like the other extreme of just being like incredibly bleak. So dealing with like the overt traumas of the violence of World War One and what it has done to people in a movie where Bela Lugosi is the good guy, and as the good guy, he doesn't do very good things either, right? Like he's not a good person, but he is the hero. So it gives you an idea of what the Black Cat has going on. None of these movies had very much to do with Poe Queen. They're just Poe in name only. Murder in the Rue Morgue, I mean, it does have that snippet of the Poe story in the movie, but it's whatever. The Black Cat has nothing whatsoever to do with the Poe story. And The Raven actually is a meta thing. It's about a guy who tortures people because he's inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's stories. So it's not an adaptation of Poe. It's like it's a tribute to Poe, right? Martin asks, what are your thoughts on Sony's remakes? Like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think those two movies were fine. Dracula is one of the most adapted and filmed characters in cinema history. So I think there's plenty of room for there to be other adaptations of the story, other versions of him. And I don't get all bent out of shape because I don't happen to like one or another. Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think, is one of the better adaptations, certainly. I mean, it's very much that 1990s romantic vampire sort of thing, like sort of post-interview with the vampire. It tries to turn Dracula into more of a romantic hero. So that's a little confused. But overall, I think it's a good movie. The only weak spot in it, if you can even call it that, is Keanu Reeves. Right? He's a little bit Keanu-ish as Jonathan Harker. Keanu Reeves is a great human being, and he can be great in the right role. Right? Like, it's a stroke of brilliance to cast him as Neo. Might not have been the best choice for Dracula, but it's fine. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is fine. They're fine. they're good. I actually have a copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't have a copy of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I do appreciate that they did actually try to do an adaptation of the book as it is, like to make the Frankenstein monster how he is in the book. So I appreciate that much, certainly. I did not see Renfield. I was kind of on board until I saw the first trailers, and it was like, supernatural action movie with a lot of navel gazing by Renfield. I was like, no thanks, no need to see that. So I just didn't bother, didn't care enough to see it. In fact, I don't care enough to see a lot of movies. The only movie that I am looking forward to right now is Godzilla -1. That is the only movie that I am making an effort to actually go to the theater to see. Which is sad because I love the theater going experience. But even our national theater chain's classic series, their definition of a classic and my definition of a classic are two different things. Because their classic movie for December is Elf. It's like, you couldn't pick, like, It's a Wonderful Life? Or something like that. Jeez. So, anyways, yeah, I actually want to see Argyle. Well, yeah, it's got John Cena in it, right? No, Henry Cavill. But Godzilla -1 is definitely, I'm excited for that one. But that's like it. Maybe Argyle. Gary Oldman was fantastic as Dracula. And like Robert De Niro's Frankenstein monster, fair enough. I did see The Invisible Ray. I don't usually watch it, so a little bit hard to remember what it's about, but it's a mad science story, right? Boris Karloff plays the mad scientist who gets irradiated by the invisible ray and kills everything he touches, if I remember correctly. So, more science fiction than horror. Yeah, well, I mean, at this time, those are still fuzzy categories at this time, right? We're talking 1930s here. There wasn't a clear distinction in cinema, at least, between horror and sci-fi, right? Like, you think 1931, Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Is that science fiction or is that horror? It's kind of both, isn't it? Frankenstein. Is that science fiction or is that horror? It's kind of both. So it wasn't like super clear. Werewolf of London is another example. Is that science fiction or is that horror? Because one of the major themes of it is science sort of butting into sort of tradition and superstition and stuff like that, right? Science bumping into the inexplicable. So these movies, it's not as clear cut as to what is science fiction and what is horror at this point in movie history. Yeah, Tennessee -1 on Friday. Yeah, I'm thinking we got shows starting on Thursday here, so I'm trying to decide. Friday I can't because we have a Christmas carol sing thing at our church, so I can't go on that day. But I mean, even where it's playing all week, so I might we'll find some point at which to see it. But as for Werewolf of London, I did like Werewolf of London. I think Werewolf of London, it's not... I think I talked about this actually in my Wolfman video. It doesn't have the sort of... the purity of concept that the Wolfman does, to its detriment. But, considering that they were just kind of making it up as they go along, there isn't like a clear single source of werewolf mythology like, Dracula or the Frankenstein, right? For some they're trying to make up as they were going along, I thought it was okay. It was interesting. The biggest weak spot of it, I think, is the fact that the relationship between Dr. Glendon and his wife is not a very sympathetic relationship. Like, we don't see that they love each other, right? In fact, it's far easier to see it as like an arranged marriage where this younger woman is being married off to this older man. But then they try and make the whole like, oh, he's doomed to kill the person he loves most, which is her, apparently. It doesn't play as well. So that's kind of a weak point in there. Really, the movie is more about like him and the other character. Don't want to spoil anything. But if they had focused more on that, then, the romantic relationship wasn't all that big and that important, so focus more on this other conflict going on. Would have made it a stronger movie, I think. But I mean, Werewolf of London as a first attempt at a werewolf movie by Universal, I think it's a game attempt, and I would love to get a Werewolf of London figure from NECA. So, yeah. Dracula's Daughter was way ahead of his time. Dracula's Daughter was great. It's another one of those movies. It's kind of like Son of Kong, where I don't think you could watch Dracula's Daughter on its own and think it was a particularly great movie. But as sort of the epilogue to the other movie, it works. Right? Like, I like Son of Kong. I would have liked it more, I think, if they had been able to do the movie they wanted to do. But Son of Kong is fine as an epilogue to King Kong. Dracula's Daughter, as well, I think is fine as an epilogue to Dracula. You find out what happens to Van Helsing after he kills off Dracula. And the way they flip it, so it's not just Dracula again. Dracula doesn't come back. And instead you have his daughter, whatever that means. They never really established what the relationship is. His daughter comes in, and now they flipped it so that it's a story about this vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire, right? And this was done like, 60 years before Interview with the Vampire. like that's pretty impressive. That they would make a movie about a vampire who doesn't want to be one, and the moral issue that this vampire is having with being a vampire and how they're trying to fight it. So yeah, I like Dracula's Daughter as well. In fact, I will often watch Dracula's Daughter, I think more often than I actually watch Dracula. Because it's a smaller film, it's a smaller scope, which is weird to say with Dracula, because most of it takes place in a drawing room. It feels like a more constrained film, so it's got a smaller cast, and yeah. But in a lot of ways, it's more interesting than Dracula, because you have the conflicted vampire character in it. Right? So, and the other characters who are like don't believe her and trying to psychoanalyze her and all that sort of stuff. She was definitely a sympathetic character, yeah. She's meant to be a sympathetic character, and you're supposed to feel even bad for her that she succumbs to her vampiric urges and stuff like that. Her sexuality was a bit ambiguous in the finished film. I think that's a lot to do about nothing, personally. Because it is so minor. Like, okay, she kind of seduces a female, a woman, so she can drink her blood. But she spends the entire movie pining after Dr. Garth. So, and really, there's a love triangle. Actually, it's a love quadrangle, really, because you have Dracula's daughter, you have Sandor, her servant, you have Dr. Garth, and then you have Dr. Garth's secretary. So, I think the lesbian overtones in Dracula's Daughter, I think they're there. I mean, there is the scene where she's seducing another woman. But I don't think they're really that pronounced. I think it's a bit more of people today wanting to find that in the movie than it is really what the movie was setting out to do, if that makes sense. I'll give you an even clearer example of what I'm talking about. There is a silent movie called The Florida Enchantment. It's a Florida Enchantment. And it is about this lady who inherits these seeds that can change your gender. So she pops a seed and she becomes a guy. Her servant pops a seed and becomes a guy. Also, her fiancé, a wealthy older man, pops a seed, becomes a girl. And everyone talks about how this is like an early queer film. And it has a scene of, women kissing, right? This woman who has become a man uses her position to an advantage to seduce the other girls around, right? It's not. It's meant to be a sort of an upper class farce. And especially like how they portray the fiancé who transforms into a woman and is like the most like flamboyantly gay sort of stereotype and then gets lynched. Like that's not a sympathetic portrayal of gay men, It's I think that like that's a case of people wanting to see what's there, not necessarily what the filmmakers were trying to make. Right? So I was saying that's an example of like some of the like presentism, right? Looking at a movie from the past through modern eyes and not through the eyes of the people who would have made it. Right? If you want to find more queer allegory stuff, go to James Whale. That's where you're going to find more of that. And like transparently so. But I think Dracula's Daughter has it, but it's people make more out of it than what is really there. Because they want to find it, because they want it to be like this very progressive movie ahead of its time. Invisible Man was probably one of the best movies from the period. Yeah, and again, another James Whale movie, right? This is very much in the James Whale vein of his sort of sense of his comedy and that sort of thing. And then, I mean, Claude Rains, perfectly cast. You know, if you're going to have a character who's a voice for almost the entire movie, except for like 2 seconds at the end, then Claude Rains is the guy to get, right? Be him or Vincent Price, who was the Invisible Man in the sequel. So, yeah, excellent casting, and James Whale, his dark comedy and stuff like that. Yeah, Invisible Man's a good movie, underrated movie. Like it's definitely one of the lesser ones, but it's a good one. Was The Mummy basically a remake of Dracula? Yes, and better, in my opinion. I mean, I did a whole movie or a whole video about The Mummy and what's so great about The Mummy. I think The Mummy is great because, yeah, it's taking the basic idea of Dracula, right? You have this immortal monster who is pursuing some young ingenue for some nefarious reason. It takes that and it makes a much more engaging story out of it. Right? Why is he after the ingenue? Oh, it's because she's the reincarnation of his lost love. Why is he a monster? Oh, it's because he violated the taboos of the gods to try and bring back his love, right? And then why is he pursuing all these characters and why is he destroying all these lives? Well, he's laying waste to everyone in his way between him and this woman that he loves and for whom he has suffered for thousands of years. So it's taking that basic idea of Dracula and turning it into something incredible and heartbreaking. And yeah, I actually like The Mummy more than I like Dracula, as a movie goes. It's quite possible. I haven't done a scientific assessment of my favorite Universal Monster movies. But I would be willing to bet that The Mummy might actually be at the top of the list for favorite Universal Monster movies. At least right now. I mean, it can always change based on my particular, what I'm into at the moment. But, yeah, I think The Mummy would probably be right at the top of the list, certainly. And River Van Sloan was in it, and playing basically the same role. Why was the mummy called Imhotep in the first film, but then he was called Karis later on? Because it is a different mummy. Karis is a different mummy from Imhotep. The Karis series, so it's the Mummy's Hand, the Mummy's Tomb, the Mummy's Ghost, the Mummy's Curse. That is a different story with different rules. In fact, something I complained about in my Mummy video is that they succumbed to the temptation to give the mummy rules. Because in the Mummy, Imhotep the mummy doesn't have rules. They don't know really why he exists. They don't know what he can do. They don't know what his limitations are. They don't know how to destroy him. Like he just can do this stuff, and they don't know what to do about it. Whereas Karis, it's like, okay, he needs the Tanna leaf fluid, and he needs 3 to stay alive, and 9 to reanimate, and more than 9 will make him a monster unlike the world has ever seen. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Which would have been a great way to take the movies if they had actually followed through with that and like gave him more than 9 Tanna leaves and to see what he does. Would have been a great movie. He's got these rules and he stays a mummy, like he stays wrapped in bandages, shambling along, slowly chasing his victims. Which is unfortunate, because one of the things that makes Imhotep so interesting is that they don't know what to do about him. They don't know how to deal with him, and ultimately it's the gods who have to deal with him. The Karis series, he's really more of a prop. That's something that Lon Chaney himself said. Lon Chaney Jr. He hated the mummy role because the mummy didn't do anything. Could have been anybody under there. The mummy's really more of a prop. Like the only time that I really dig the Karis character is the Mummy's Ghost. The one with John Carradine. in it, because that's when Karis finally freaks out and turns on the priests of Arkham, because they keep messing everything up for him. He's just supposed to be protecting Ananka, and they keep messing it up, and he finally flips, loses his shit on one of them in the third movie. Plus, the ending of the third movie is amazing, and that leads into like this incredibly scary scene in the next movie, when Princess Ananka is emerging from the swamp. Is terrifying. That's also on my list of like top 10 scariest scenes in Universal Monsters. And then, yeah, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy is another mummy called Clarice. So, they are all separate characters. They are not the same character. They don't have the same origin as such. It's a close to same origin. So, Imhotep, his Ankhsenamen dies. She was like a priestess of Isis, so he wasn't even supposed to be messing around with her anyways, right? So that alone was bad enough. Then after she dies, he gets the Scroll of Thoth, which has the spells to bring her back to life, but then he gets caught, and then he gets mummified alive and buried alive, and with the scroll, so nobody else can find it. Whereas Karis, he was a prince, she was a princess, and Anka was a princess, so that part was fine. But then she dies. But then he goes to get the Tana leaves. It's the rare Tana leaves. And if you do this exact mathematical number of leaves, it'll bring somebody back to life. And then he gets caught, and he gets mummified, and that sort of stuff. They reuse a lot of the footage from the Mummy. So a lot of the Mummy's origin, that flashback scene in the original Mummy, they reuse a lot of that footage for the Karis movies. But it's not exactly the same origin, right? Because they have different powers and different reasons why they exist and that sort of thing. I like the Mummy that could talk. Yeah, that would be Imhotep. We should have teamed the Mummy up with another monster. I like the fact that the Mummy is its own self-contained story. Imhotep goes through this whole arc. He gets defeated, and that's it. It's over. And I kind of like that. That said, of course, everybody imagines in their head which monsters would you have fight each other, right? And I could very definitely see a story of Dracula and the Mummy fighting over control of the Frankenstein monster. See how the Mummy and Dracula face off, right? Could be an interesting story if I ever got my dream of Universal Studios for no particular reason putting me in charge of the Universal Monsters franchise and making that story come to life somehow. But I'm not expecting that phone call anytime soon, shall we say. Unless there's somebody from Universal watching this right now, in which case, make me the Universal Monsters brand manager. It's like a dream job. Come on. I know I'm critical of Universal Studios, but how they handle the monsters, but put me in charge. That's why you should put me in charge. So there. Hammer had a remake of The Mummy with Christopher Lee. That was really good. Maybe. I said I haven't got into Hammer, so I don't really know about that too much. Brendan Fraser Mummy films didn't really have much to do with the original. No, they did not. They're sort of a poor man's Indiana Jones, which is fine if you like that. If you're into that, great. More power to you. They're fun. They're okay. They're not really... I'm not like in love with them. Like I'm in love with the original. But they're certainly entertaining. At least the first one is. I mean, I gather... I think I did eventually see the second one. I know I didn't see the third one, and my wife says don't bother. So I'm not going to bother. But certainly better than the remake they just did, Tom Cruise, right? But definitely one of the advantages of the Brendan Fraser ones is the location shooting, right? You're in the desert and all the cool Egyptian stuff going on. It's got a bit of a bigger scope than the 1933 version. Dracula versus the Mummy, yeah. We'd all watch that. Yeah. As long as it was good. As long as it was good. I know what I think Universal should do if they really want to bring back the monsters, but it would only appeal to like the half dozen of us that are in the room right now. So whatever. All right. Where are we at now? Well, shall we carry on to the next era of Universal monsters, which would be the B-movie era. So, with this, of course, I mentioned already that Universal Studios kind of went into receivership because of costs accrued during the making of Showboat. And then Universal was bought out, was saved. However, the Carl Laemmle Sr. and Jr. were out of the company, and the new management at Universal, decided that they were going to bring back the monsters, but they were going to do it in a far more profitable form. Not these big, grandiose, epic films like James Whale's Bride of Frankenstein, but instead as relatively cheap, quickly made, inexpensively produced B-movies, about an hour long or so. We've already kind of been talking about that, because we've been talking about the Chorus Mummy series, but these are... I'm not going to read them all. There's a lot of them there. So all the Invisible Man movies, all the Invisible Man sequels, all the Chorus Mummy series, the Captive Wild Woman series, and, of course, the Wolfman being perhaps the only one of real note. But also, this includes, the Wolfman Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, right? So these are the Frankenstein sequels and the crossover movies. So Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. So, thoughts on those? We've already been talking about the Chorus movies, so we've succeeded in that part, not much. But what about the Frankenstein sequels? What about the crossover movies, the team-ups? What about the movies that didn't get folded in? One of my favorites is actually The Mad Ghoul, which I think is hilarious. So The Mad Ghoul is where a mad scientist, he takes like this all-American college student and turns him into a goth. Like he becomes a ghoul, this mindless ghoul where he's all like pale with like sunken eyes with black makeup, and he's wearing all black and his hair is all messy. I'm like, oh my god, he's goth. They turned the college jock into a goth, you monsters. So The Mad Ghoul is actually one of my favorites, definitely of this era, at least, the B-movie era. But it's fun as an old goth myself, who used to have the dressed all in black with the big floofy Robert Smith hair and all that sort of stuff. I enjoy The Mad Ghoul. Hammer Mummy, kind of a fusion of both, classic, and yeah. Love Captive Wild Woman and her sequels. Cool. I have a copy of Captive Wild Woman. It didn't leave a hugely strong impression on me. But I would like to get the, I think it's Volume 5 or Volume 6 of Shout's Universal Horror Blu-ray sets, because that's the one with all 3 Captive Wild Woman movies on it. And I don't have those movies, and I'm kind of a completionist. I want to get all these movies, right? So I want to get it, but I also don't want to pay $75 Canadian for it, which is what it goes for, which seems like a lot for those movies. Stick them on like one Blu-ray and sell that for like $20, and I would buy that in a heartbeat. $75 for a 4-disc set also includes like some Paramount movie. It's a bit much for me, but I still want to see all of the Captive Wild Woman movies. A long time ago, the TNT cable station, I think, ran the entire Frankenstein movies in order, dubbed them all. Now I need a VHS player. Yeah, that's the hard part, right? All these extinct technologies. Yeah, well, I mean, I have the... I did that video about what is actually in my video collection. So I mean, I have the Universal box set, the 30 film Universal Monsters box set. So I'll sit at the store and I'll watch them all like sort of in order. I mean, it's pretty easy. They're all in the order in which they were made, so it's not hard to know what order do I watch all of the Frankenstein movies. It's like, well, you just watch them in the order they were made. But and then sneak Dracula and Dracula's daughter and the Wolfman in there, so it makes a bit more sense. But yeah, it's it's fun. I mean, it kind of drags in the middle until I team him up with the Wolfman, right? But yeah, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman was a turning point in the Universal monster genre. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that's where they first teamed them up, right? But then when you think about it, they only did 3 movies of them being teamed up, right? So there's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. It's only 4 movies out of the whole 72, 73 of them, right? They never did cross over the Mummy. They never really crossed over the Invisible Man, although he does make that cameo in Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. The Captive Odd Woman, that was her own series. So, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I would say a bigger turning point was Son of Frankenstein, because that was the one where it really went B-movie. Even though Son of Frankenstein was an A-list picture when they made it, and it had Universal's highest budget that year, but it was so unambitious compared to Bride of Frankenstein and the original Frankenstein. It was just, that's where the Frankenstein monster becomes a prop, right? They introduced Igor in that one and so on, and it has the air of a B movie even though it had an A movie budget. I think Son of Frankenstein is really the turning point there, where it went down to B movies, and then once it went to B movie, then I don't know, maybe them teaming them up ended up being inevitable at that point, because it's like, well, what do we do? What do we got? Well, why don't we put them together? We'll try that out. And I go like George Zucco, and yeah, George Zucco was like one of the MVPs of the B movie era. He was in everything. Him and Cedric Hardwicke. Why can't the dude who had orgies? What was his name? God, he was in Son of Frankenstein too. You never trust him. Lionel Atwill. Here we go. Lionel Atwill, George Zucco were like the MVPs of the B movie era for Universal. Captain Wild Woman Keys a remake? Yeah, sure, why not? Better to remake movies that maybe weren't all they could have been the first time than to try and remake like perfect movies. Captive Wild Woman would probably be a way better candidate for a remake than The Mummy or King Kong. We like House of Frankenstein? Yeah. Son of Frankenstein, Basil Rathbone as the Doctor's Offspring, yes. Basil Rathbone, another great. Looking as suspicious as possible in Son of Frankenstein. House of Frankenstein is good, except that it's too like A plot, B plot. Like, okay, you got Dracula, and then Dracula dies, and then you have the rest of the Frankenstein and Wolfman story. I think House of Dracula actually integrates that a lot better. So it's like House of Frankenstein is like a draft, and then House of Dracula is where they really gelled the concept of the big monster mash together. In fact, one video that I'm kind of toying with making, it started as a different video, and now I'm kind of like, maybe I should go in this other direction with it, is which is the real end of the series? Is it House of Dracula or Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein? Which is the actual end of the Universal Monster series? Because you can make arguments for both. They're very different movies. Right? And House of Dracula definitely has much more definitive ending for the characters, whereas Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein is much more of like the archetypal form of these characters. So, yeah. The morals clause in actors' contracts was created because of Lionel Atwill. Yeah. That guy was something. He had something going on there, certainly. I've actually been off and on reading Fay Wray's autobiography. And, because I did the video about her birthplace. So, of course, I was reading all the relevant material to that. But reading more of it as I just going along here. Man, Hollywood was always filthy. And you also hear stories about, like the House of Allah, or Garden of Allah, the hotel. And stuff like that. And Hollywood was always filthy. Hollywood was always horrible. Fay Wray talks several times about her brushes with almost having surprise sex. Like it's, yeah, Hollywood was always disgusting. And Lionel Atwill was an important part of that. So there you go. But yeah, it's nothing new. Hollywood being Babylon is definitely nothing new. You get beautiful people, famous people, and wealthy people all together, and that's why the good Lord says don't become any of those. Yeah, definitely haven't told me Frankenstein. Yeah. Fay Wray was so beautiful. Yeah, she was. She's grown on me a lot, actually. As I have watched more of her movies and taken more of an interest in her as I've become more of a fan of King Kong as well. And having that connection with her being born in my neck of the woods. Yeah, I still, like, as Kong goes, I actually like Helen Mack a bit more. So the girl in Son of Kong. But, Fay Wray is, one of the greats, right? Fay Wray never appeared in Universal films, sadly. No, she did not. She did a lot for RKO and for Columbia, for Paramount, but not for Universal. All right. Well, now Queen is going to bat for Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. So, does that mean we should move on to the next phase of Universal Monsters, which is the Abbott and Costello series? So where do you put these, right? So as the Universal Monsters are getting long in the tooth, as it were, and are, the profits are going down with each subsequent movie, and so are the Abbott and Costello movies. The Abbott and Costello movies are getting lower and lower returns each time. So, what does Universal do? But, hey, let's put the monsters and Abbott and Costello together. So you get Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, 1948. And that worked. So, let's do more. What do we got? Well, we can meet Boris Karloff, we can meet the Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is also the only Universal version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The other more famous version, of course, is the Frederick March version, which is a Paramount movie. And I'm going to meet the Mummy. Chick! Oh, Chick! Wow! Yep. So, Abbott and Costello. Just a few horror films. Did you ever see Mystery of the Wax Museum? So, just going back to Fay Wray for a moment. Yeah, I've seen Mystery of the Wax Museum. It is not as good as House of Wax. I do prefer the Vincent Price version. Yeah, I've seen House of Wax. I have seen The Vampire Bat. Most Dangerous Game. King Kong, of course. And, there's another Fay Wray one that I have seen. I suddenly forget its name. But, yeah, I kind of made it a point, actually, a bit over the summer, as I was doing this research into Fay Wray and her birthplace and stuff like that, of watching more of her movies to get a better sense of, like, her as an actress. But yeah. Glad they brought back Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Oh my god. Okay. So, Boris Karloff is the only actor I know of who managed to diminish two separate movies because he wasn't in them. So, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, right? You have Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. They got Bela Lugosi back to play Dracula. Where was Boris Karloff? Boris should have been Dr. X. Thank you, Kaiser. Boris Karloff should have stepped up to play the Frankenstein monster again. But he was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, you got everybody else back, but it's a comedy movie. No. So he wasn't in it. And as a consequence, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is a fine movie, right? It is one of the all-time classic horror comedies, right? It's like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Comedy of Terrors, Ghostbusters are like the 3 top horror comedies. Now, if I was going to add a 4th, I would add Arsenic and Old Lace, which is the other movie that was wrecked by Boris Karloff not being in it. Because in Arsenic and Old Lace, one of the characters is supposed to be a criminal who was surgically altered to look like Boris Karloff. And one of the running jokes is how much he looks like Boris Karloff. And what makes it a joke is that in the stage version, he was played by Boris Karloff. So it's like, haha, he actually is Boris Karloff, and everybody's commenting how much he looks like Boris Karloff. However, when they made a movie version of it, with Cary Grant and Peter Lorre and Raymond Massey, they got Raymond Massey to play that part. Because Boris Karloff, depending on what you read, either he chose not to or he wasn't allowed to play his role in the movie. And it's just like, without him, that joke falls completely flat. It's like, yeah, I guess he kind of does look like Boris Karloff. Like, whatever. The joke is that it is Boris Karloff. So, because Boris Karloff was not in it, he diminished both Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and Arsenic and Old Lace. Now, there is a version of Arsenic and Old Lace that was made for TV with Tony Randall in it, in Cary Grant's role, and it does have Boris Karloff in it. And I do have a copy of it, so there is that. But the problem with that version is that the rest of the cast isn't as good, right? Cary Grant and Peter Lorre, like, come on. So that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that Boris Karloff managed to mess up 2 movies by not being in them. But he saw that Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was a success, and so he came back for Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So there you go. Neither of which are actually as good as Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Very unfortunate. Boris Karloff never worked with Cary Grant. Yeah. If this is indeed a multiverse and every decision that we make spins off into infinite numbers of other universes, I hope that out there somewhere in the multiverse is the universe where Boris Karloff was in Arsenic and Old Lace, the movie. I really hope that universe exists, if there is indeed a multiverse. Seems that Universal was trying to steal Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as their own by including Jekyll and Hyde in the failed Dark Universe. Yes. Yeah. It's always been on the cusp, right? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has always been on the cusp of Universal. Because the only version that Universal made was the Abbott and Costello one. The Frederick March version was Paramount. The Spencer Tracy version was like either Warner or MGM, one of the two. It's always just kind of on the cusp, right? And, back in 1931, 32, when there wasn't a franchise yet, it was just these horror movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde were always lumped together, right? There is the Disney cartoon of Mickey's Grand Premiere, where he is going to Grauman's Chinese Theater there for the big premiere of his movie, and you see all the movie stars, the caricatures, and they have the caricatures of Dracula, Mr. Hyde, and the Frankenstein monster all together on for a scene. So, it was common to lump him in with them before there was a concept of the Universal Monsters franchise. And, I guess Universal decided they were going to do that for their Dark Universe, not realizing that the Dark Universe was a load and totally failed, and rightly so. And yeah, so too bad, so sad. But yeah, I mean, he's been floating on the cusp of that forever. Um, Another weird one, speaking of what's Universal tries to appropriate, is the last Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. They had it. It was like a French themed one. So they had the Phantom, they had the Invisible Man, and they had the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But it wasn't the Lon Chaney Hunchback. It was the Charles Laughton Hunchback. Like if you look at the art for the last Halloween Horror Nights, it is very obviously a Charles Laughton inspired Quasimodo that's on that art. So it's like, stop! Now you're trying to lay claim to him too. Which, granted, I would love to get a NECA figure of Charles Laughton Hunchback, but the Frederick March Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde won an Oscar for Best Picture. Did it win Best Picture? Hold on a sec. I need to fact check that one. March Dr. Jekyll Best Picture. Yeah, Frederick March won Best Actor, tied with Wallace Beery for the Champ. So nominated for 3 Academy Awards, March won the award for Best Actor. Okay, so that's what it won. So it's like I don't remember that movie winning Best Picture. But yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. Going back to the golden age now, a couple eras ago. Yeah, it is that and Kong, I think, are tied as the best Universal monster movie that's not a Universal monster movie. So, yeah, I mean, the Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like, if you didn't know who made it, good luck telling that apart from Universal movie. The production values are perfect. The makeup is perfect. The story is perfect. It's all perfect. It has all of the hallmarks and the quality of a Universal monster movie from that same time period. So, yeah, I have no qualms about kind of, honoring it, sort of letting it stand there alongside, same as King Kong, right? Sort of a honorary Universal monster, not made by Universal. Boris Karloff had a role in the original Scarface, yeah, sure. That's not one I've seen, so. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's in the public domain. Written by Robert Louis Stevenson, yes it was. Yep, like Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll. Mr. Hyde. And I keep bouncing back and forth in pronunciations. It actually is Dr. Jekyll, not Jekyll. But everybody knows it as Dr. Jekyll, so. But yeah, it's a Scottish name, so it's supposed to be Dr. Jekyll. Prestige for a monster movie, yeah. Well, I mean, there hadn't been... At that time, they hadn't really yet ghettoized movies. So there's probably a better chance of somebody in a genre film getting an award back then than today. Right? Like, honestly, the only category at the Oscars that matters is Best Sound Editing. Because Best Sound Editing is the de facto best genre movie. Right? The best science fiction, fantasy, horror, or war movie, that's Best Sound Editing. You look at what's won Best Sound Editing, and it's like it's the must-watch list of again, horror, sci-fi, and fantasy movies. It's like, what's one? Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Terminator 2, The Matrix, Back to the Future. Like, all those movies have won Best Sound Editing. So, Best Sound Editing is the category to watch in the Oscars, if you're into genre movies. R.L. Stevenson, the author of Treasure Island, yes. The same R.L. Stevenson, you bet. Same R.L. Stevenson who decided to go off to the South Seas, live on tropical islands, and eat mangoes. That sort of thing. Tahiti and Hawaii and such. It's good for him, Hey, sure, why not? All right. Well, I think we've run down the Abbott and Costello series, which, oh no, Kaiser's mentioning the transformation scene in Frederick March. Oh god, the transformation scene in the 31 or 32, whichever it is, I think it's 31. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is incredible. Like, how do they do that? Like, I know how they did it. Like, I know technically it's the different colored gels in front of the camera. But it's just like, wow, you watch that transformation scene, and it is just magic. Like, wow, how it makes the like fade transition they use for like the Wolfman and whatnot just look like absolute child's play. That just watching Frederick March just transform in front of your eyes like that, just from how they using the disadvantages of black and white to their advantage in pulling off this makeup trick is absolutely astonishing. Yeah, like that's amazing. And then seeing it all from his point of view as well is a stroke of directorial brilliance. Yeah, it's such a good movie. Doug says, there's a BBC production called Jekyll, a limited series, 6 episodes, 8. It happens now, but works off the conceit that the events of the short story is historical fact. I don't trust BBC. So, whatever. They can do what they want. What's the definitive version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I would say the definitive version is the Frederick March version. So the 31 there. The Spencer Tracy version exists. Like, I don't think it's that great. I've watched it once and it's like, nah, not interested. Frederick March version, I would, and Kaiser agrees. Frederick March version is the definitive one to watch. It's a missed opportunity. Karloff not starring as the monster in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Yep, that it is. He ruined 2 movies by not being in them. At least the movies themselves are still really good. Like, Arsenic and Old Lace is still a brilliant movie. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is still a hilarious movie. It just would have been that much better with Boris Karloff in them. Oh, Ashley mentions the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde musical by Frank Wildhorn as being her favorite version. That switch gel transition in an episode of the original Twilight Zone, though I forget the name. That is, I don't know the name of it either. I love the Twilight Zone. It is my favorite TV show. I have seen every episode, but that's a lot of episodes, so I don't remember that exactly which one either. A wax figure of the Frankenstein monster comes to life briefly in Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I should watch that again. It's been a while since I watched that one. I did go on a Universal bender this week, watching as many as I could in preparation for the live stream, but I bypassed that one, unfortunately. I might even know why I bypassed it, and that's because it wasn't in the box set. So I actually don't have a Blu-ray of it. I have the complete Abbott and Costello Universal Movies box set, so I do have it. But yeah, I just realized it's not in the Universal Monsters box set because it's not a sequel to an actual Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie. So they didn't put it in the box set. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, but it is in the Abbott and Costello box set. So I do have that. Which also has some other good movies in it, too. If you like Universal Monsters, which I assume we all do, then Hold That Ghost is a good one by Abbott and Costello. And Coming Around the Mountain has this great scene with Margaret Hamilton as like this Appalachian backwoods witch. And there's like the whole voodoo doll thing, and it's actually a really great scene. In this otherwise like sort of backcountry Appalachian set comedy with Abbott and Costello. But yeah, watch that movie for that scene with Margaret Hamilton. Just picked up the entire Twilight Zone box set a couple weeks ago. Yeah, it is. I have that one. It's a good one. I had bought a previous DVD set. There's a whole bunch of sets actually put out by some company I can't remember right now. but it was like 15 sets of Twilight Zone DVDs, and then I traded it all in for the one set with the entire series in one box. I'm not upset that I did. Also easier to find them because the other set, it was just randomly spread out throughout these like billions of DVDs. Whereas like the box set, it's season by season, which makes it easy to find the good ones. Or the really good ones. I mean, they're all good, but the really good ones, right? Ever see Lon Chaney as a monster in a TV production of Frankenstein? No, I didn't. He wore terrible makeup in that. Well, good to know. He thought he was doing a rehearsal and didn't break anything when he went on a rampage. Okay, I gotta see this now. So, Lon Chaney Monster TV Frankenstein. Okay, I'm gonna look for this now. Sounds unintentionally hilarious. All right. Well, we've talked about Abbott and Costello, and now that brings us up to the last era of the Universal Monsters, which is the Atomic Age, the Universal International era. So, Universal Studios merged with International Pictures, forming Universal International from the late 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And at this point, the monsters, the classical Gothic monsters, had kind of run their course. The B movies were what they were. The monsters kind of got a proper ending with House of Dracula, and then entered their archetypal forms in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And the future belonged not to Gothic monsters, but to sci-fi and atomic horrors. Not that they stopped making spooky movies altogether. The Thing That Couldn't Die and Curse of the Undead are both spooky movies, but you really start to get these atomic and science monsters like Creature from the Black Lagoon, It Came from Outer Space, This Island Earth, Tarantula, The Mole People, The Deadly Mantis, The Incredible Shrinking Man, a couple dinosaur movies in there as well, and The Leech Woman. So, what do you think about the Atomic Age monsters? In fact, do you even think these monsters are Universal monsters? That is a bit of a controversy as well among Universal Monster fans. In fact, I even know some very purist type people who do not believe that the Creature from the Black Lagoon is actually a Universal monster, because it is a science fiction monster and not a Gothic horror monster. So, what do you think? Are Tarantula, the Deadly Mantis, the Metaluna Mutant, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, are they Universal monsters? Are they not? What do you think of these movies? I love the period when Universal made science fiction movies. Yeah. Oh, Martin says he recommends the Hammer films. Main three: Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, and the Mummy. Also Curse of the Werewolf and the Gorgon. I will I'll look into those eventually. It's not that I don't want to like Hammer, I just haven't got around to it. But to have a little project I'm kind of setting out to do, I'll talk about later, that might stall seeing the Hammer ones for a while. But it's not because I'm against them, I just haven't got around to it. The Creature from the Black Lagoon was in 3D. Yes, and when I did the video about it, somebody actually corrected me. Because I had assumed, like I think everybody assumes, that the Creature from the Black Lagoon's 3D was always the red-blue 3D, right? The red-blue glasses. The original actually wasn't. It was actually closer to how 3D is actually done today. I didn't know that. So it always was in black and white. It never was the red and blue 3D. I didn't know that. And somebody corrected me in the comments of my video on the Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I'm grateful to that person for correcting me. So the 3D version that is on the Blu-ray, that is actually the more accurate version. All spiders are monsters. Correct. I know some people consider the shark from Jaws a classic Universal monster. They are wrong. They are for sure wrong. Like, the cutoff is at least 1960. Because after that, you just get different things going on. And Jaws is from an entirely different era. And if you start letting in Jaws, then you have to let in the other ones, right? Like the Thing from Another World, the John Carpenter Thing, and stuff like that. And no, that is completely a different thing entirely. That is really where I will draw the line. Are Tarantula and the Deadly Mantis kaiju movies? Well, they are giant monster movies. Depends what you consider a kaiju movie. Does a kaiju movie have to be Japanese? If it does, then no, they're not, right? Kong is not a kaiju. The Deadly Mantis is not a kaiju. Tarantula is not a kaiju because they're not Japanese. Except for the Japanese King Kong movies. Then he's a kaiju. But if you consider kaiju as just a synonym for any giant monster, then I suppose technically they are kaiju, aren't they? The big trick for me is to find a large enough mantis and a large enough tarantula toy to go in with the rest of the monsters here. But there is also a movie that could have been made, right? Tarantula versus the Deadly Mantis. That could have been a nice kaiju knockdown, breakdown fight. Doug says, I place humanoid monsters, Dracula, etc. as universal monsters, so the Gilman qualifies. The others are B-movie sci-fi and varying degrees of watchable. True. Yeah, it seems to hinge on whether you consider sci-fi as part of the same vein as the gothic horror movies, and what exceptions are you willing to make, right? I mean, I could see why someone would say the Incredible Shrinking Man is not a Universal monster movie; it's just a science fiction movie, like whatever. But Monster on the Campus, yeah. The Mole People, they have made toys of the Mole People under the Universal Monsters banner. The Metaluna Mutant, same. The Leech Woman is actually a really good movie. I actually like The Leech Woman. What I've noticed about the Universal Atomic Age movies is that they have far worse names than the movie they're about. Monster on the Campus sounds terrible, but it's actually a fairly engaging sort of evolutionary horror, right? Of like people coming to grips with the horror of our animalistic evolutionary past. The Leech Woman sounds terrible, but it's actually an interesting movie about sort of beauty standards and aging and patriarchy and all that sort of stuff. I know people don't like me using that term, patriarchy, but we're talking, this was made back in a time when there was very much like a set of social demands on women that was, in many ways dictated by men. And this movie talks about all that stuff, but you wouldn't think that all this stuff would be the topic of a movie called The Leech Woman. But it is. So, if you're talking human scale ones, then do The Leech Woman, The Mole People, Monster on the Campus, do they qualify? The ancestors of Kumanga and Kamakuras, yeah. I see The Land Unknown, yeah. I've got a copy of The Land Unknown. It is a lesser dinosaur movie, certainly. That's sort of Jurassic Park of that era. Yeah. Head of the T-Rex in the Land Unknown became the dragon spot in the Munsters. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. The Land Unknown is sort of a modern Atomic Age version of The Lost World, right? Like it's taking that same thing. And I mean, it actually predates the 1960 Lost World, where they did the same thing again, but with the official name of the Lost World. But The Land Unknown it's a Lost World story, right? It's okay. Monster on the Campus was made because they could recycle the makeup from Abbott Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for another movie. Oh my god, okay. That makes sense. And now I'm going to have to make a point of watching both of those to see that. So you just made sure that I'm going to rewatch Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde again. Because I need to confirm that. That is interesting. But yeah, I've my interest in atomic age sci-fi has really grown over the last year and a half or so, or abouts. I think, as we talked about before, um, wasn't super into atomic age sci-fi. I was much more into like the Victorian sci-fi, right? We did a whole live stream about that, 20,000 Leagues and The Time Machine and all those movies. Um, but I've kind of stopped being a snob about it and gotten more interested in atomic age sci-fi movies. And there's a lot of good ones, um, which we talked about on the whole live stream about that as well. But Universal certainly tried it out and made their gambit, made their attempt at it with their movies, of which, I mean, of course, Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of the classics, right? It is one of the great 1950s sci-fi movies, um, and one of the only memorable monsters, right? The most memorable monsters of this time period would be the Creature, Godzilla, the Fly, and the Blob. All the other monsters, like, yeah, the Metaluna mutant exists, but okay. Killers from space, the giant googly eyes, they exist, but okay. you know, the real classics, one of them is Universal Monster. So, Star of Land Unknown, Jock Mahoney later played Tarzan. Dinosaurus is a great fun film, despite not being perfectly great film. Dinosaurus is fun and very cute as well. The actual dinosaur, it's like this terrifying T-Rex, and he's pretty cute. Enjoyed Tarantula the Deadly Mantis. They make fun watching on a dull, dreary Saturday afternoon. Yeah. One of the things I love about the Deadly Mantis is that it begins with like a 20-minute documentary on the dew line. Like they have to explain the radar defense network in order for the Deadly Mantis to make sense. And it very much has that Cold War vibe. Like it's, okay, it's a giant monster, whatever, but it's kind of like by proxy a Soviet invasion of North America via the Arctic. And so it's got like this, begins with a documentary about the dew line, which is fun. And a lot of these movies would begin with these sort of very important scientific narratives with some very robust narrator, often Paul Frees, describing something very important and scientific that you need to know, whether that is the evolutionary drama or the dew line or outer space, and what we have seen from outer space, or how many meteorites crash into our planet, or whatever. Very important science stuff that you need to know to understand what's going to go happen in this movie. So, yeah, the dew line. Yep. Yeah, we all focus on the monster, forget about the very important scientific introduction to the movie. And yeah, say director's The Blob. Yeah, cool. My favorite Universal science fiction from that era was This Island Earth. Yes, This Island Earth is the fun version of 2001: Space Odyssey. It's the one that's actually watchable. Yeah, This Island Earth is all right. I mean, it's kind of suffered a bit, I think, in public consciousness because most people who know about it seem to know about it from Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, which is controversial as well for anybody who actually cares, because they took a relatively good movie and made fun of it, right? And they were upfront about the fact that they picked it because they needed, if this was going to be in movie theaters, they needed a movie that looked good in it. They couldn't just do like absolute garbage like they did on the TV show because people were paying money to see the movie of this. So they needed a good movie. So they picked This Island Earth and made a good movie sound like complete garbage. So it's like, okay, thanks, Mystery Science Theater 3000. But This Island Earth, I mean, it's certainly got high concept, right? It's the Vertigo, the Infinite. It's 2001: A Space Odyssey, a decade before 2001. And it's actually way more interesting because it actually has like characters and a monster and stuff, and it's got the highfalutin ideas, right, about our place in the cosmos and the drama of evolution and the fight for survival. But way more interesting. And got a cool monster in it. I think where's my guy? There he is. He's hiding out behind the banner right now. But hey, oi. Another figure that NECA should make as well. Although you can get the Super 7 Ultimates Metaluna Mutant if you feel like paying even more than you would pay for a NECA figure to get that. If I ever see it on sale, I might get it. But not chomping at the bit to buy a Ultimates Metaluna Mutant right now. Yeah, Land Unknown's T-Rex Roar has been reused as stock sound a lot as much as the Wilhelm Scream. Yes. I actually love, this is a total aside, I love using those stock sound effects for like my ringtone and stuff like that. My ringtone, like usually I keep my phone on silent anyway, but when I get a text, it's that you know that standard crowd gasping sound? that's my ringtone when I get a text. So, and I think I have the Wilhelm Scream in my phone too. I love those old sound effects. You can identify. Metaluna Mutant is a great creation. Yeah, it is a good design. It's limited by the fact that it's a guy in a suit. I think that is a monster that you could actually redesign really well in CGI. Like the other monsters, leave them as they are. But the Metaluna Mutant, you could make it way more insect-like. With the benefit of CGI, get all those different joints moving in the weird ways they're supposed to be moving, right? And I've seen some great fan art of a redesigned Metaluna Mutant as well. I think that's actually one that, could be redesigned really well in the modern day if they chose to remake this Island Earth. But again, I wouldn't trust Hollywood to make anything good anyways, so that's just not. Had great special effects for the time, yeah. Oh yeah, special effects were like pretty top notch for what they could do with the budget they had at that time. Yeah. Island Earth had a good cast as well. Yeah, Rhodes Reason, Jeff Morrow in it. Yeah. I mean, also the aliens are a bit sketchy. If I was going to do a remake of This Island Earth, I would do away with the foreheads, and I would give them like reptilian eyes or something like that, right? Remove the contacts and they got like reptile eyes, kind of like Man Who Fell to Earth kind of thing, like something like more subtle alien features than the weird forehead. Yeah, This Island Earth actually would be an example of a movie that I would be comfortable, if Hollywood could do it well, which they can't, but is a movie that in principle I would be comfortable with being remade. Because I think that there's a lot of room for improvement that it could have had to be everything that it could have been. And that is a perfect candidate for a remake. Like, don't remake Bride of Frankenstein. It is perfect. But This Island Earth, yeah, you could remake it. I think you could. If the person knew what they were doing, I think they could remake This Island Earth well. What about the Mole People? Very underrated film. Yeah, Mole People is fun. Mole People is another one, right? You think, oh, it's like some weird underground monster thing. Oh, no. It's way more than that. It's like this underground lost civilization and this one girl who is like not a weird albino creep, and this slave race of underground monsters, and it's like there's a lot more going on in it than a movie called The Mole People would have, you'd think. So, remake of They the Earth Stood Still is a shining example of Hollywood chunking a nuanced idea into a block of bleh. I didn't see the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I don't plan on it either. So I will take your word for it. It sounds very plausible, Doug. Those big foreheads were laughable? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to figure out how do we make aliens that look alien, but, not like what other people have done already, and I don't know. It is what it is. The mole creatures were scary. Yeah, they were good. They were well designed. Again, that's another one that I could, NECA wants to make a figure of the Mole People, I'd buy it. Because I'm still looking for Phantom, because they undersold that one. But in fact, half of mine to drive down to Great Falls, Montana, and see if it's at the Target there. But if anybody's in Great Falls, let me know if you got Phantoms at the Target. But yeah, it Mole People's fine. Mole People's fine. Yeah, from this era, I mean, they've already got Gil, but from this era, for NECA figures, Metaluna Mutant, Mole People, you couldn't really do a Leech Woman figure, but I would love something to represent her somehow. I guess, I mean, you could have like different heads, like her more aged head, her younger head, that sort of thing. Like give her the different hands and heads to make her older or younger. But then who would buy the Leech Woman toy? Like me. So no such luck there. But anyways, yes, mole creatures are fun. Hooray! Hooray for the moles. Jaden Smith was in the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Keanu Reeves. Yes, I didn't know Jaden Smith was in it. That's a messed up family, hey? We don't necessarily do celebrity gossip here on this channel. If I had a P.O. box, perhaps. I do not have a P.O. box. But if you want to message me somehow, I can give you my mailing address. I don't actually mind. How would you mail me? Look up... I'm not sure if YouTube allows for private messaging. But if you're on Facebook, look up my store. Monster Kid Boutique. Bootique. And message me via that. And that'd be a way to get in touch with me. Leech Woman would include her murderous ring. Yes. Yep. And the corpse of her husband would be a good accessory. Yeah. It's also got like the whole like exotic, like far-flung locales, the deepest, darkest jungle thing going on, which is also really, it's a neat setting as well. Yeah, I'd say actually, out of all of this era of Universal movies, I mean, The Creature of the Black Lagoon is a classic, of course. So that would be number one. But I would say, like, sort of aside from Creech, I would say that the Leech Woman is actually probably my favorite. And the Monolith Monsters, right? Those two. Don't forget the Monolith Monsters. Yeah, the Monolith Monsters is also a great one. So yeah, Leech Woman and the Monolith Monsters, I would say, are my two favorites once you take Creech out of the equation. She used to instantly kill men by removing their spinal fluid. Yeah, ugh. And make her young again by drinking the spinal fluid of men. It's very satisfying though when you know, her husband gets killed and stuff. It's like, oh, that's all right, good job. Because they made him extra horrible just to, like, you know, make it easier for her. But then, of course, it gets more morally ambiguous after that when she has to keep killing to maintain her youth. But yeah, and yeah, Monolith Monsters is another good one. A classic. You know, it's not even really a monster; it's a cosmic horror, right? Like just this meteorite lands and it's got a mineral on it that just keeps growing and replicating with water, and we happen to be on a planet with a lot of water. So yeah, and be pretty disappointed with Target recently for shrinking down their physical media section. We understand why, since it's becoming a niche. Physical media is getting harder and harder to come by and more expensive as well. That's my issue with Shout, actually. You got Shout, you have Arrow, you have Kino, who are sort of like the main like boutique physical media distributors. So like Shout does the Universal Horror Blu-ray box sets. Is it Shout or Kino has some of these movies that we've been talking about here. Like now, if you want to get a Blu-ray of The Leech Woman, yeah, you can pay like $30 to $40 for a Blu-ray of The Leech Woman that is just bare bones. Like all it has is the movie and the trailer. Like it's just wow. That's why I didn't want to switch up to Blu-ray to begin with, is because it was super expensive and all these bare bones things, and it hasn't really changed all that much. Like I have picked up some Blu-ray sets, like the Universal Monsters Blu-ray set, but I want to get King Kong on Blu-ray. But like a lot of these movies, like these Universal ones from the Atomic Age that we're talking about, I don't want to pay $40 per movie. Like that's ridiculous. I'm not gonna do that. Nuts to that. But it's the market, right? Rare movies being sold in small runs, small prints. So they got to extract the value out of a smaller customer base for those. So the price goes up, and I get that. Sucks though. Like just if they just dumped like 30 movies, Universal Monster movies, just like the entire Universal Horror Collection, just dump all that in one set, and I would pay $75 for that. I'd pay $100 for that. But I'm not paying $40 a movie for, I like them, but they're still like B movies, right? Like they're not exactly high cinema. And this isn't exactly Criterion Collection where there's like all these amazing bonus features and stuff. They're the bare bones releases. So it doesn't make that $40 worth spending. Ever see The Thing That Couldn't Die? That was Thing That Couldn't Die. That's the head. Yeah, very low budget, but really interesting concept. I like that one actually. It's one of the later ones. Again, not one of my favorites like Leech Woman or Monolith Monsters, but it's it's sort of this dance of seduction to evil by this decapitated dude. is an interesting movie. The Severed Head Sometimes People, yeah. Criterion Collection, yeah. Well, Criterion Collection's in a class of their own. Like they do such a good job. Like the movies they put out are worth it. Like they are worth the money you're paying for those. Because they put so much on there. They make it worth it. Like I bought the Criterion Showboat. Totally worth it. Criterion The Blob. Totally worth it. But these other ones, it's like, Murders in the Rue Morgue. Just bare bones. All it's got is the movie. And it's $40. Like, no. No dice. No dice on that one. Head of a Powerful Warlock. The Brain That Couldn't Die. Yeah. Oh, God. You could watch Brain That Couldn't Die on YouTube. A lot of these movies are on YouTube. They just haven't been caught yet. So, just go to YouTube. They're all on there. Brain That Couldn't Die is also a good one. It's a classic one. Come on. So, like, physical media. Yes, I am not giving up my physical media. In fact, I have bought more stuff on physical media since the dawn of streaming than I ever did before. So, especially Disney Plus. I might have talked about this before. But Disney Plus has been really disappointing because I was really looking forward to that to fill in the gaps of my physical media collection. Because I have, like, a lot of Disney movies. I showed them in my collection video. So I was really hoping that Disney Plus would have like all the short cartoons, all the Mickey cartoons, all the Donald cartoons, all the Chip and Dale cartoons. And they don't. And in fact, I have a better collection of vintage Disney stuff than is on Disney Plus. And so it's like, why do I have you around? Well, I keep Disney Plus to watch Zorro and What We Do in the Shadows. And Loki. Because Loki's actually good. Yeah, it's disappointing. And so as a consequence, I have bought like so much. I made more of a point of buying more like Disney stuff on physical media. Like the old stuff, like the old Walt Disney Treasures discs and things like that. So I have like all the Mickey Mouse cartoons on physical media now. All the Silly Symphonies on physical media. And yeah, Universal Monsters, definitely. All physical media, all the way. All that old stuff, because you don't know if it's always going to be available, if they're going to take it down, because the licensing and things like that to go with it. You never know when suddenly Universal's going to decide they want to create their own streaming service or something. You never know if it's going to shift around between different services. You never know if it's going to get censored anymore, or if you have to sit through like some thing like warning you, like don't. This is old, so it's got old things in it. Which is fair enough to have that to placate certain people, but yeah. Anyways, so always have physical media. Anything you really love, have physical media. Buy it, find it, don't give it up. Keep it, because yeah, like you streaming is such a volatile medium that you never know if things are going to last on there. And so you might as well like have a physical copy of anything you really love. Even YouTube, right? Like a lot of stuff's on YouTube. And the next best thing to physical media is downloading it onto your own hard drive. Like I'm not going to say what I have on there because that might be a legal issue. But I certainly have a hard drive with a very sizable movie folder. Not of current stuff, just of old stuff that nobody releases. You can't get on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. Because that's the next best thing to having physical media is at least having it on your own hard drive. So, again, not going to say what I have on my own hard drive, but I bet you have seen James Rawls' video on why Blu-ray sucks, which I disagree with most of the arguments. I have not seen that. I'm going to have to watch that as soon as this is over. I bet I can imagine. My misgivings have been that sometimes the picture quality is too vivid, so it actually hurts my eyes a little bit, and can actually end up making a lot of things look like it's shot on video. So it makes it look cheaper and worse. Like it looks like a soap opera as opposed to film. And then the want of special features, right? Like it really feels like sort of special features peaked with like those amazing Warner Brothers like 2-disc sets. So like the 2-disc My Fair Lady, the 2-disc Around the World in 80 Days, the 2-disc Adventures of Robin Hood, and the Disney Platinum Collection. Those really seem like where special features peaked. These beautiful 2-disc sets, second disc, all of just amazing special features and stuff from the vault and things like that. I mean, nowadays it's ridiculous. $40 for a Blu-ray that just has the movie on it. Disney, the Signature Collection or whatever, the most recent type of movies, have like no bonus features. Like I've actually go out hunting the old Disney Blu-rays, whether Platinum or Diamond Edition, because the new Blu-rays have nothing on them. It's just like the movie and like some music video by some little Disney Channel Pop-Tart that I have no idea like who they even are. It's lame. So find the old stuff too. Like find the older Blu-rays and stuff that actually have bonus features. Universal distributed King Kong vs. Godzilla when it was shown in the States. So they did own the rights. They still actually do own the rights to the English dub version. Universal, that is one of the King Kong things Universal does own, is the English dub versions of Godzilla, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and King Kong Escapes. Which is why when you go down to the video store, if you have them in your neighborhood, and you look and you find the DVD for those movies, it's Universal. And in fact, I've even seen a 3-pack of King Kong vs. Godzilla, King Kong Escapes, and the 2005 King Kong. Because Universal actually owns all those. The movie, like the Japanese version, is Toho, of course. But Universal has like the rights to the English versions. Remember, they used music from Creature of Black Lagoon in King Kong vs. Godzilla. Yes, they did. Does have a point. Streaming is more convenient. Streaming is convenient. I will use Disney Plus to watch movies that I have on physical media, but I'm not giving up the physical media. No way. No how, no sir. Doug, I have a huge VHS collection, about 400 plus titles. though at least 350 are dubbed from TNT, AMS, TMC, etc. DVDs aplenty as well. Now I got to upgrade to Blu-ray. I was so slow to upgrade to Blu-ray. I mean, I was already a late adopter to DVD, because once DVD started coming out, then VHS got really cheap, and like I could go to like a pawn shop and get like, you know, the Disney Masterpiece Collection VHS for like $2 a pop. So that made me a late adopter to DVD, and then I did upgrade to DVD, and then I was like, I am not upgrading again to Blu-ray. Like, how many times do I gotta buy the Universal Monsters? Come on. But what has actually sold me on Blu-ray was the TV at my store. So I have a giant TV at my store. Because when I opened my store, I was very conscious about wanting the classic movies playing as part of the aesthetic of the store. So I got this huge TV and a Blu-ray player, so I could play my DVDs and whatever. And the thing is, this TV is so new. The guy I got it off of just upgraded to an even better TV. And he is a guy, when I went to his house to pick it up, it was obvious that he was not hurting for cash. And then, like, the DVDs always kind of looked a little pixelated and kind of meh on the TV. So that's actually what sold me on upgrading to Blu-ray. But I very, very rarely buy new Blu-rays. I almost always, shifting around here, I almost always buy them used. So, like off Facebook Marketplace or at used bookstores and stuff like that. Because I don't feel like paying full price for them. So, you know, the Universal Monsters, I bought them all on VHS. Then I bought them all again on DVD. So, I only bought the box set when I could get it for cheap. Let's see here. I think there's a colorized version of the brain that couldn't die. Yeah, colorized. They apparently don't want us to own content without paying for it. Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea, is that, you know, legally, the argument they make is that you don't own the movie. You own the physical medium. You own the disc. You own the tape. You don't own the movie, right? So they've been trying for years to figure out a way to go to like a rental model. One that was floated around was figuring out some way of like charging extra money if you resold the VHS tape. Like, what? How would you even know that? They want to get their little dirty little claws in there. So now streaming is like the best thing, right? Because now you don't even own a physical copy of it. Right now you're just paying your rental fee for this online service that is streaming the thing. And I mean, that's got whole other issues, right? Where it's like, now you're paying essentially the same rates you were paying for cable, but now you're paying for like a dozen different streaming services. And something's got to give at some point, right? Of course, in my family, you know, my wife pays for Amazon Prime. I pay for Disney Plus. Her brother, my brother-in-law, pays for Netflix. And we figure it out from there, right? Isn't Peacock kind of Universal's streaming format? Probably, because Peacock is NBC, and that's the same parent company. So these companies are so greedy. Yeah, it's the definition of a company. Fortunately, there's a lot of sites where you can download movies now. Oh, yes, there are. Say all the high seas, etc. Not that I advocate that. Police who are watching my thing. I'm not going to say anything about where to get what. But the internet information wants to be free, doesn't it? They don't include bonus features because they don't want to pay people for using content in a different format. That makes sense. Still lame, though. Universal distributed King Kong Escapes, yep. Still watch my DVDs sometimes, yeah. I think 4K Blu-rays are kind of hit or miss. Mostly hit, but not that big of a leap in my opinion. I'm not going to upgrade most of my collection anytime soon. 4K Blu-ray might be actually too much for me. I mentioned before one of my problems with Blu-ray was that a lot of it's too vivid. Like, I actually can't like directly look at the screen if we watch the Disney's live-action Cinderella because it's like too vivid. 4K would probably kill me. Probably give me a head explode. Like, I don't even think I see in 4K. not with my eyesight. So, yeah. Yeah, definitely not looking to upgrade anytime soon. I'm very slow in picking up Blu-rays. And 99% of Blu-rays I buy are secondhand. So, haven't paid to see a movie in years. Yeah, I haven't paid to see a movie this year. Godzilla -1 is going to sneak in under the wire. Maybe the only movie that I've actually seen in the theater this year would be that one, now that I think about it. Unless we've seen another one in the theater, but I don't think so. Yeah, that's the state of movies, eh? All right, well, where are we at for time here? 9:35. That is a ripe old time here. So I guess that means time for maybe some previews of coming attractions. Let's see here. All right, so some stuff that is upcoming, kind of. I actually don't have anything scheduled in December right now. So these are all sort of videos that are in the process of being made, and some of them might not even appear until the new year. But what I'm working on is something I alluded to in a post I made not too long ago about this very strange advertising campaign with the Son of Kong that I found out about and have gone crazy buying stuff from Japan to do with this. So I'm going to be getting that box in another week or so of that stuff from Japan. So I'll be definitely doing an unboxing of my latest buy purchases, and part of that is going to be this. So this video is going to be coming out about this very strange Son of Kong advertising campaign out of Japan. And then another longer term one is this series I'm going to be starting. And I kind of alluded to this already, which is I've kind of been piqued by RKO Pictures, the actual movie studio that produced King Kong. I've done a lot of videos about Kong stuff in general, including, one coming up here about this weird advertising campaign with the Son of Kong. So I kind of got interested in the studio, RKO Pictures. And so I'm going to be doing a quasi-series-ish of just a King Kong fan watches RKO and talking about RKO and reviewing different movies, specifically RKO. So I've been writing the first part, which is just a general history of RKO Pictures and how it sort of relates to Kong and what the studio did in a broader sense. And then the first one I'm going to review is actually the movies of Dolores Del Rio. She did at least three movies with RKO prior to King Kong. And the reason I'm picking her is because Bird of Paradise is actually one of the proximate movies to King Kong. Like, a lot of what happened with Bird of Paradise went on to determine a lot of the things that happened with King Kong. So the first stop on this King Kong fan watches RKO Pictures is Dolores Del Rio, the Bird of Paradise. But these two might not be out until the new year. So we'll see about that. And then the next live stream. Somebody already asked. Thoughts on doing a live stream? Yes, I've thought about doing a live stream. And yes, there's going to be one. So, no particular theme. I mean, I just pick Rankin Bass here because it's charming and it's cute, and I watch Rudolph every year. But yeah, But here's a question I can put to you guys in the stream, in the chat room here. What do you think? Before Christmas or after Christmas for doing this Holly Jolly Christmas live stream? Remembering, of course, the 12 days of Christmas go from December 25th to January 5th. So, there's still 12 days of Christmasing in there. And if it's after Christmas, then we can also show off, like, Christmas presents and things bought with Christmas money and so on. But what do you think there in the chat? Do you think before Christmas or after Christmas for the next live stream? Kaiser says after. Okay. While your guys are typing in your answers here, I'll just look at the rest of the comments. Wonder why the box office is down lately. Yeah, garbage movies that nobody wants to watch. That's why they're down lately. And I mean, the culture war and nobody trusts Disney and all that sort of stuff. But just nobody trusts Hollywood anymore. And nobody's gonna leave the house to go see a movie that they're not sure what they're gonna get. Cute Little Monkey is supposed to be Kiko. Yes, it is supposed to be Kiko. Well, I'll talk about that partially when I do the unboxing video from my latest Bayou purchases, and then when I do a proper video about Kiko, the son of Kong. Are you also not considering seeing Napoleon? I am not considering seeing Napoleon in the theater. It might be interesting, but I just don't care enough. We got after. So, the Monster Kid Cory Holly Jolly Christmas live stream is going to be after Christmas, but probably before New Year. That'll be our December. In fact, let's see. Yeah, actually, Saturday, Sunday is the... Well, we're probably not going to do it on... Ooh, that is the Sunday, isn't it? Well, we're probably not going to do it on New Year's Eve. Because that's not necessarily how I want to spend my New Year's Eve. But, yeah, definitely might be like the 29th or the 30th. We'll see. We'll see what works out best. At least for me. That said, I suppose, well, I mean, it's going to be New Year somewhere, right? So, doing a New Year's Eve live stream at my usual time will end up being New Year's at some point for somebody. Napoleon was a bigger monster than any of the Universal ones. Well, we're not talking about, real life monsters. Give me a Dracula over a Hitler any day, right? Yeah, why did they make a movie about Napoleon? Why not, I guess. Ridley Scott wanted to do a Napoleon movie, so he got to do a Napoleon movie. It's a warmongering dictator. Well, it depends who you talk to, right? France is all like, this was the last time that we were important. So, and I'm a Francophile. I can say I love France. But yeah. Anyways, so that is what is coming up, kind of, more or less. Like I said, I don't have anything actually scheduled yet for December. I've been having kind of a writer's block with videos for various reasons I don't need to get into. But it's been slow going for trying to actually make anything. So, but those are some ones that I am for sure working on. So, and I might sneak in some other ones before the end of the year. I always do somehow when I think I'm out of ideas, something comes along. And then I always got more like movies I can do why they're so great when the mood strikes me to write about that. So anyways, there we go. We'll see if my my pace of making videos slows down a little bit or whatnot. But yeah. At least Google's actually paying me now as well. So I actually got a deposit from Google the other day. So that was nice. My advertising revenue is coming in. But yeah. So haven't been seeing any more activity in the chat. So it looks like we're all ready to curl up, go to sleep, etc. It's probably getting late for any of you who are east of me. So I guess that will be a good night then. Hey? So thank you for joining me once again on the live stream here, talking about Universal Monsters. It was a good time, as always, here with the usual suspects. We need to come up with like a name for this gang that we've got going on here. other than the Monster Kids. Have I seen the animated Godzilla series? Like the one, which one? Which animated Godzilla series? I've seen the Singular Point. I've seen the anime trilogy. Not the one from the 90s though, because I didn't like that movie anyways. But maybe we can talk about that on the Christmas live stream. Which animated Godzilla you're talking about? So, everyone's saying goodnight to each other, and that means I'm going to say goodnight to you as well. So, good night, and we'll see you again next month.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.